every own. 77 years later, a nation that was built from ashes, surrounded by enemies, driven by survival, now stands at a crossroads. Israel, a beacon of resilience. Today, it looks like Gaza. Why? Because war doesn't just scar the land, it scars the soul, and all it took was one Iranian strike, just one. Not just a missile, it was a message. A reminder that power can turn fragile, and silence can turn deadly in a matter of seconds. One Iranian strike was all it took to shake the image of a nation that once stood tall as a symbol of strength, survival, and progress. 77 years, Israel represented resilience, a country built from the ashes of history, surrounded by adversaries, and constantly in a state of alert. It has been a beacon of security and military innovation, standing firm in the face of countless threats. Yet, in one moment, the tables turned. With a single, powerful strike from Iran, the illusion of invincibility shattered, and Israel began to mirror the very destruction it often associated with Gaza. War, at its core, does not discriminate. It doesn't care about your history, your victories, or your borders. When it arrives, it leaves behind a trail of destruction that goes far beyond rubble and debris. It scars the very soul of a nation. The aftermath of that one strike wasn't just seen in the damaged buildings or the craters left behind. It was visible in the eyes of the people, eyes filled with fear, confusion, grief, and disbelief. This wasn't just a political incident or a strategic military maneuver. This was a brutal reminder that no nation, no matter how powerful, is immune to the trauma of war. The psychological damage of such an event is deeper than any physical wound. It penetrates the minds of children who wake up screaming from nightmares. It breaks the spirits of parents who can't protect their families. It dismantles the sense of normalcy, of routine, of peace, and replaces it with constant dread. War leaves emotional scars that linger long after the smoke clears. These scars don't heal with ceasefires or treaties. They fester in the silence after the sirens. They grow in the hearts of the survivors, becoming anxiety, depression, and mistrust. A nation that once felt safe now lives in a state of constant hyper-awareness. Every sound, every flash in the sky becomes a trigger, and when that happens, a society begins to crumble from within. Trust disappears, hope fades, people start to view each other through a lens of suspicion and fear. The shift from a secure state to a war-torn region is not always marked by massive military defeats. Sometimes it begins with a single moment that changes everything, a single strike. That's what happened here. In one flash, Israel saw its own vulnerability. It felt, perhaps for the first time in decades, what it was like to stand where Gaza often stands, in the shadow of destruction. And in that moment, the two places looked eerily similar. The buildings, the chaos, the sirens, all part of the same tragic song of war. This is what people forget about conflict. It's not just about territory or ideology. It's about what it does to human beings, how it crushes their sense of identity, security, and dignity. No military success can reverse the emotional collapse that war brings, and this is the deeper truth that emerged from that one Iranian strike, that no matter how long a nation has stood, no matter how advanced or fortified it may be, war can reduce it to fear and ashes in the blink of an eye. And the deepest wounds, they're the ones you can't see. In every war, in every conflict, it is always the innocent who suffer the most. Not the politicians in suits making decisions from distant offices. Not the military commanders watching from secured bunkers. It is the mothers holding their children tightly in dark, hoping the next explosion doesn't hit their home. It is the fathers digging through rubble with bare hands, searching for family members buried beneath the destruction. It is the children, died and silent, who don't understand why their world is suddenly filled with smoke, fear, and death. These are the people who carry the true weight of war, and they are always the first to bleed, the first to grieve, the first to lose everything. When one Iranian strike hit, it wasn't a government that cried. It wasn't a nation that wailed. It was a human being, a family, a neighborhood. People who woke up that morning thinking it was just another day, not knowing it would be the last time they saw their homes, their loved ones, their sense of safety. That's the cruelest part of war. It steals the ordinary from ordinary people. The routine becomes a memory. Breakfasts are interrupted by bombs. Bedtime stories are drowned out by sirens. School books are replaced by funerals. And what do these people have to do with political agendas? Nothing. They didn't draw the borders. They didn't declare the war. Yet they pay the highest price every time a missile is launched. Every time a target is hit, the echoes reach the hearts of the innocent. A destroyed building may be called a military success, but inside that building, there were people with stories, with dreams, with families. War reduces them to numbers, casualties, statistics, but behind each number is a name, a face, a life that will never be lived again. In both Israel and Gaza, pain wears the same face. Grief sounds the same in every language. The cries of a mother who lost her child are no different because of geography. The fear of a child hiding under a bed doesn't change depending on religion or race. That's what conflict fails to recognize, that humanity exists on both sides, innocence exists on both sides, and yet, these are the very people who are caught in between, treated as collateral damage in a war that they never asked for. As missiles fly and explosions light up the sky, leaders argue and strategize, but it's the civilians who bleed. Hospitals overflow. Schools turn into shelters. Streets become battlefields. And amid all of it, the innocent keep trying to survive, not knowing if they'll live to see the next day or the next hour. This is not just a tragedy. It's a failure of leadership, a failure of empathy, a failure to protect the very people that nations are supposed to serve. War is never clean. It's never controlled. Once it starts, it spreads like wildfire, burning through everything and everyone in its path, regardless of guilt or innocence. And so, we must ask ourselves, when the dust settles, what will be left? More hatred, more graves, or will we finally learn that the true victims of war are the people who had nothing to do with starting it? Until we answer that question with action, until we prioritize peace over pride, the innocent will continue to suffer, forgotten, broken, and unheard, and their silence will be the loudest reminder of all that we failed to protect what matters most. Hatred and revenge are two of the most powerful and destructive forces in human history. They do not just erupt overnight. They build slowly, fed by pain, fear, injustice, and the memories of past wounds that never fully healed. In the context of ongoing conflict, especially between nations or peoples with decades of tension, hatred becomes a legacy passed down through generations. It embeds itself into culture, politics, education, and identity, and when one side strikes, the other doesn't just retaliate. They respond with the weight of all the anger they've carried for years, sometimes for lifetimes. This is how the cycle of violence continues. One strike begets another. One loss leads to more retaliation. One moment of rage turns into years of war. That's what we see in the aftermath of events like the Iranian Strike. It wasn't just a military operation. It was another chapter in a long, bitter book that both sides feel they're trapped inside. Each believes they are right. Each believes they are defending their people. Each remembers the pain inflicted on them and demands justice. But when justice is pursued through revenge, it becomes indistinguishable from vengeance. And vengeance never leads to peace. It only fuels more hate. This cycle becomes self-perpetuating. Children grow up hearing stories of the enemy's cruelty. They are taught who to blame before they even understand why. Fear becomes normalized. Trust is impossible. Leaders find it easier to rally people around anger than around forgiveness. And so the hatred continues, feeding off every new tragedy, every new loss, every new headline that shows suffering on their side. Empathy disappears, and without empathy, humanity collapses. It's important to recognize that hatred doesn't require truth. It only requires pain. And revenge doesn't solve pain, it only spreads it. When one side is attacked, their first instinct is not to question why, it's to strike back harder, to show strength, to make the other side feel what they felt. But what does this accomplish? More death, more trauma, more orphans, more shattered homes. The idea that one more act of violence will end the violence is the great lie of war. People forget that revenge feels good only for a moment. It might bring temporary satisfaction, a sense of control, but it never heals. It never truly balances the scales. Instead, it hardens hearts. It solidifies divisions. It removes the possibility of understanding, and without understanding, there is no path forward. When Iran struck, it wasn't just about one missile. It was about decades of mistrust, decades of policies, blockades, strikes, and silence. And Israel's response, in turn, is never just about that one act. It's about a long history of survival in a hostile region. Both sides carry history like a weapon, using the past to justify the pain they cause in the present. But at some point, someone has to ask, where does it end? The truth is, hatred and revenge are easy. They're reflexes, but healing, forgiveness, dialogue, those are hard. They require courage. They require seeing the humanity in your enemy. They require choosing peace even when every part of you wants to scream and strike back. But that is the only real solution. As long as we let hatred lead, we will keep walking in circles, mourning the same losses, repeating the same history, and never learning the lesson. And the lesson is this: no amount of revenge can undo the past. Only love, only empathy, only the willingness to listen and to understand can break the cycle. Otherwise, every strike will just be the beginning of the next one, and the war will never end. In a world constantly focused on displays of power, on missiles, armies, technology, and military strategy, it's easy to believe that strength is measured by how much destruction a nation can unleash. But the deeper truth is that true strength doesn't lie in weapons. It lies in wisdom. It lies in restraint. It lies in the ability to choose peace even when war feels justified. The events that followed the Iranian strike revealed this truth with haunting clarity. While the world watched Israel's reaction, while politicians and commentators debated the size of its response, the real question we should have been asking is, what does real strength look like? Anyone can pull a trigger. Anyone can launch a missile. That takes force, yes. But it doesn't take wisdom. Wisdom is what tells you when not to act on anger. Wisdom is what stops you from making decisions that will cost innocent lives. In a time of war, wisdom is far rarer than power, and that's why the wisest nations, the ones that truly understand the value of peace, are the strongest, because they know how to protect their people not just from enemies, but from the darkness within themselves. When leaders use their military as a symbol of dominance rather than protection, they weaken the very moral foundation of their nation. They trade principles for pride, and in doing so, they may win battles, but they lose the soul of their society. Buildings can be rebuilt, roads can be repaved, but once a nation loses its moral clarity, once it starts justifying the unjustifiable, it becomes hollow. It becomes a machine of survival rather than a symbol of humanity. True strength requires vision. It demands leaders who can look beyond the next retaliation and ask, what kind of future are we building? Are we raising children to fear everyone outside their borders? Are we teaching them that might is always right? Or are we showing them that courage also means compassion? That being strong means knowing when to fight and when to forgive? The Iranian strike exposed more than vulnerability. It exposed a mindset that has become dangerously common, the belief that showing restraint is weakness, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Restraint is one of the hardest things a powerful nation can exercise. It's easy to act on rage. It's hard to lead with responsibility, and yet, that's exactly what separates a great nation from one that merely survives. Wisdom also demands empathy. It means seeing not just the cost to your own people, but the cost to others as well. Every action, every strike, every retaliation ripples across generations. If a country truly values its children, if it wants a future where they don't grow up traumatized by war, then it must make decisions rooted in foresight, not fury. Think about the strongest individuals in your own life. Are they the loudest, the most aggressive, or are they the ones who stay calm in chaos, the ones who think before they speak, the ones who care deeply, even when it's difficult? Nations are no different. The greatest power a nation can have is not in its ability to destroy, but in its commitment to build, to protect, and to uplift. The world does not need more shows of force. It needs more examples of wisdom. It needs leaders who understand that while weapons can win a war, only wisdom can win peace. And in the end, the nations that last, the ones remembered not just for their victories but for their values, are the ones who chose wisdom over war, integrity over impulse, and peace over pride. That is the strength the world needs now more than ever. Destruction is instant. It can happen in a blink, in the sound of a single explosion, in the moment a missile touches the earth. In seconds, entire buildings collapse, neighborhoods vanish, families are torn apart, and lives are changed forever. This is the terrifying speed at which war operates. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't pause for reflection. It moves fast and it hits hard. The aftermath is left for the survivors to deal with if they're lucky enough to survive at all. But while destruction is immediate, healing is not. Healing takes time. It takes years, decades, sometimes generations. You cannot rebuild trust overnight. You cannot restore what was lost simply by clearing rubble or putting up new buildings. What's broken on the outside is only a fraction of what's broken inside the hearts and minds of people. War damages infrastructure, yes, but more importantly, it damages the human spirit. In the aftermath of the Iranian strike, destruction was visible everywhere. The physical damage was shocking, but the emotional impact ran deeper. People lost their sense of safety. Children were traumatized. Parents were overwhelmed with fear. Communities once full of life were reduced to silence and grief. This kind of damage doesn't go away after a ceasefire. It stays, it haunts, it shapes the way people live, the way they think, and the way they see the world. Healing requires more than time. It requires intention. You have to choose to heal. You have to create the conditions for peace. That means building back trust, fostering dialogue, and giving people the tools to process their pain. It means investing in mental health, education, and community support. It means teaching future generations that peace is possible even after unimaginable loss, and that's not easy. It's the hardest thing any nation or society can do, because it's much easier to build a wall than to build a bridge. One of the most overlooked aspects of healing is acknowledging the pain. Too often, leaders and government rush to move on, to put a positive spin on tragedy, to ignore the emotional aftermath because it's inconvenient, but you can't skip grief. You can't jump straight to rebuilding without first understanding what was destroyed. That's why healing begins with listening, with honoring the experiences of those who suffered and giving them a voice. Rebuilding also means breaking the cycle of revenge. If the only lesson learned from destruction is that retaliation is necessary, then the cycle continues. One generation's loss becomes the next generation's anger, and the war never truly ends. It just changes form. Healing asks us to take a different path. It asks us to forgive, even when we don't forget. It asks us to imagine a future where peace is not only a dream, but a goal. History is full of nations that were brought to their knees by war and rose again through healing. But it never happened quickly. It happened through patience, through compassion, through consistent and difficult work. Healing is not loud, it's quiet. It happens in therapy rooms, in schools, in homes. It happens when people begin to trust again. It happens when survivors find meaning, when communities find unity, and when leaders find courage, not to fight, but to listen. This is why destruction should never be celebrated. No matter how justified it seems, no matter how strategic it may be, its consequences are deep and long, lasting. The real test of a society is not how fast it can destroy, but how deeply it can heal. And healing, though slow, is what leads to true strength, lasting peace, and the kind of future we all deserve. Peace doesn't begin with treaties. It doesn't start in conference rooms or on political stages. Peace begins with people. It begins with personal responsibility. Quiet, individual choice to do something different, to break the cycle of hatred and revenge. When a war erupts, when missiles fly and cities burn, we often look to governments and leaders for answers. We expect them to fix everything. But the truth is, lasting peace cannot be imposed from the top down. It must rise from the bottom up, from ordinary people making extraordinary decisions to choose understanding over anger, to choose healing over harm. In the wake of violence, it's easy to feel powerless. It's easy to think that as just one person, your voice, your actions, and your mindset don't matter, but that's a lie. Wars are sustained by collective fear, collective blame, and collective silence. And just as a nation can fall into war one person at a time, through hate, through mistrust, It can also rise into peace the same way. Personal responsibility means asking yourself, what am I doing to contribute to peace? Am I fueling division with my words? Am I ignoring injustice because it doesn't affect me directly? Am I willing to see the humanity in someone I've been told to call my enemy? Every time someone chooses to listen instead of argue, to comfort instead of criticize, to learn instead of judge, that person becomes a peacemaker. These moments may seem small, but they build momentum, they shift energy, they create space for understanding to grow. And when enough people start making those choices, communities begin to change. Dialogue replaces conflict. Cooperation replaces competition. And over time, healing becomes possible. This is especially important in times of crisis, like after the Iranian strike that brought devastation and fear. In moments like that, it's tempting to harden your heart, to close yourself off from those you see as the other side. Real peace comes when you keep your heart open, even when it hurts, when you refuse to let fear control your actions, when you refuse to inherit hate passed down from generations before you. Personal responsibility also means being aware of what you share, what you consume, and what you support. Media you watch, the conversations you join, the posts you like, they all shape the collective mindset. Are you promoting unity or division? Are you spreading hope or fear? These choices, though they may seem insignificant, form the emotional climate of a society, and peace cannot grow in a climate of rage and blame. We must remember that peace is not passive. It's not the absence of war, it's the presence of justice, compassion, and courage. It requires bravery to speak up when others stay silent. It requires discipline to choose calm over chaos. And most of all, it requires belief, the belief that your actions, no matter how small, can make a difference. When enough individuals take responsibility for peace, something incredible happens. The collective shifts. Leaders begin to reflect the people's desire for unity. Laws begin to protect the vulnerable instead of punishing them. Cultures begin to value empathy over ego. This is how nations heal, not by force but by choice, not by policy alone, but by people who decide again and again to act from love, not fear. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by the size of the conflict, remember, peace begins with one person, one word, one action, and that one person could be you. The path to peace isn't paved by power, it's walked by the courageous. Be one of them. Choose peace, not just for the world, but for your own soul. Conclusion: in the end, this isn't just a story about Israel, Iran, or Gaza, it's a story about all of us. About what happens when hatred is passed down like inheritance, when revenge becomes a way of life, and when destruction is seen as strength. We've seen how one strike can reduce decades of progress to dust, how in seconds, cities can fall, and how the innocent always bear the heaviest burden. But we've also seen something else: the power of choice. The power to heal, to listen, to break the cycle. True strength doesn't come from weapons or war, it comes from wisdom, restraint, and the courage to choose peace, even when everything around you screams for retaliation. The path forward is not easy. Healing takes time, understanding takes effort, and peace demands responsibility from every leader, every citizen, every human being. But if we each dare to act with compassion, if we speak with empathy and lead with love, then even in the ashes of destruction, hope can rise. Let this not be the moment we remember for its devastation. Let it be the moment we finally decide to change, because real peace doesn't come from power. It comes from people, and it starts with you.